What did this career burnout look like for you, and how did you navigate through that?
This was a journey. It really pushed me into a journey of finding self-compassion, of leaning into these tools, of leaning into gaining perspective. So to get anywhere from where you are, right, in the middle of that crisis, in the middle of that life transition, where everything can feel like chaos. It can feel like often in many of those situations, like your whole world just got turned upside down. C for clarity, A for acceptance, the R is rebuilding. This is where we actually take all of that information and then begin to look at our external environment and see what our plan of action is going to be.
I'm very curious of how you came to do what you do with the Radiant Living Institute and everything that you're up to. So what would you say to those people who say, what does it mean to live radiantly?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So living radiantly. So one of the core belief as to kind of why my company is even called Radiant Living Institute is that I truly believe that a radiant life begins from within. So it really starts from within ourselves. And so often as we move through life, and especially when those challenges come up, we immediately look towards everything outside of ourselves, like all of the external circumstances. What can I change in my external environment? Is it the job, the relationship? Should I move to a new city? We immediately go to those externals to feel better. But a radiant life truly begins from within. And so this is the journey that I guide my clients on, and that is core and central to my programs, is that we actually start from you, from what's most important to you, from identifying your values, your beliefs, and your ideal life, and going from there. So we start with the inner work, and then we apply that to our external to create our external environment in a way that aligns with our true values and priorities. And so what does living radiantly mean? I want to also cover that living radiantly, it means embracing all aspects of your life and of yourself. That means imperfections and all. That means understanding that these challenges that come into your life are simply part of your journey, and that you can hold space for the joys and the grief. You can hold space for the beauty and the really hard, icky stuff, right? And that is all part of life. So living radiantly doesn't necessarily mean smiling and being joyful all the time. It can, that's wonderful. But it also means just embracing all of those aspects of your life.
Yes, absolutely. And I know there's people listening who might say, oh, it's easier said than done to embrace the icky and to embrace those parts of me that I might not be happy with. And I see those people smiling all the time and it can't be real, right? There's got to be something going on there. And I 100% resonate with what you're talking about when it comes to starting within, because I'm 29 now, but when I was 21, I was doing very well financially. I had a great sales job, but I was very unhappy with myself, and I was unhappy with how I looked and how I felt, and money was like the only solace in my life. But even still, I was spending more than I was earning. So to everyone else, I looked like I had it all, but to myself, I was crumbling essentially. And I was looking externally. I was like, well, I'm going to find a different job with a new opportunity. I'm going to start over, and the grass is going to be greener over there. I'm going to go over to that pasture. And I had a mentor who told me the exact words that you just said in a different way. He said, you've got to work on you before you change the outside. So what was that realization for you? How did you discover that radiant living was first to look within?
Great question. I think as many of us who enter this space of personal development and coaching, many of us are inspired and motivated by our own journey. And so I think, a big part of it for me was going through my own challenges, personally and professionally. And through navigating those challenges, realizing that I had to look within to find those answers, to find that way through, right? One of my favorite things to share is, and I actually read this in a book by Glennon Doyle called Love Warrior, and it is that the word crisis means to sift. And so during those crisis moments, it becomes really clear what's most important to you, right? And everything else just starts to kind of fall away. And part of the reason is really when you're going through that challenging situation, we almost don't even have the bandwidth, right? To deal with the drama, to deal with the toxicity, or to deal with just all of the extra stuff, right? And so we kind of let that sift away. And all of a sudden, what's really important to you becomes very evident. And I always say, and part of my programs is also that life's challenges are the greatest catalyst for self-empowerment. So I truly believe also that life's challenges don't come to us to make us feel miserable, to make us suffer, right? I actually think it's a way for us to, and an opportunity for us to dive deeper into ourselves, to grow and to heal along our own journeys. And so that's really what it was for me. My first year of medical school, I discovered yoga. So I started going to yoga classes. I experienced like a peace within myself that I had never experienced before. And I was also at that time that I first heard of Ayurveda, which if you're not familiar, Ayurveda is the ancient medical system of India. It's also a system and a framework of self-care and wellness practices, lifestyle habits, and routines to help you feel your best. Really sees all of us as completely unique individuals. So I discovered all of this my first year of medical school. And it really piqued my interest, and I knew I wanted to dive deeper into these topics. And so I completed my medical training. I continued to, in whatever way I can with my limited time, being a busy medical student, a busy resident physician, engaged in some of these practices as much as I was able to learn about to help balance myself, to help myself manage the various stressors that came along the way, right? And so then since that time, that was over 2 decades ago that journey first began, right?
Okay.
And so then through various ups and downs of life, both professionally as well as personally, I continue to dive deeper into these tools. So what I bring to this is really both a professional exploration of these tools and these modalities, right? Being a physician, being really interested in the science behind all of this, and also studying these ancient traditions, as well as personally just diving deep, because you know what? That's what I needed. And I saw the power of it. And then that really drove my desire, both this personal and professional exploration of knowing firsthand what it feels like to dive deeper into these tools and practices, to dive deeper within, to then look without, right? But starting from within, that personal and professional exploration myself, knowing the science behind it, knowing firsthand how good it feels to start to integrate these tools, this is what really drives my desire to share this with others. And so, now I've had the opportunity to guide so many clients, so many people going through really challenging things in their life, people going through divorce, to navigating co-parenting, to empty nest, to like the first time in 18 years their children are out of the house and figuring out like how to adjust to this new reality and maybe discover themselves again, or discover their relationship with their significant other again in a whole new way. So just all sorts of different challenges and life transitions. And these are really that opportunity that life gives us to dive deeper. I'm not saying it's comfortable all the time. It's not.
Yeah.
But it's part of the process and it's part of the journey. And when we begin to look at it in that way, we can maybe begin to start to see some of the beauty in it as well.
Well said. That quote you mentioned, life's challenges are the greatest catalyst of self-improvement. And it's so true. And you've gone through a lot of challenges in your life, and just, some that I read was you've gone through divorce, you've gone through burnout in your own career, you've experienced pain in your life. And I'm guessing that was a physical pain in your life.
Yeah.
And we could go through each one of these, but if we had to dive into one, let's take a look at your career And just for the sake of an example, for the person who their children have left the nest and now they're looking to reinvent, or they're looking to add that spark in their relationship, and there is an element of wanting to reinvent who they are and create a new vision forward. Let's talk to that person, and we'll use your experience with burnout as a great place to start, because I'm assuming that even if the challenge may be different, then the vehicle to go from point A to point B might be very similar. So when you were facing that burnout, maybe you can paint the picture of what that looked like. When did you feel this burnout and lack of, I won't put words in your mouth, you tell me, what did this career burnout look like for you, and how did you navigate through that?
Yeah, wow. So I've actually, to be completely honest with you, I have experienced burnout in my career multiple times. Being a physician, being a pediatrician specifically, right? Working long hours, seeing and taking care of children who are going through things that no one should ever have to go through, not to mention a child, and being a source of support and information and knowledge and guidance to their parents as well. It takes a lot on a physical level, mental level, and emotional level, right? And so, again, this was a journey. It really pushed me into a journey of finding self-compassion, of leaning into these tools, of leaning into gaining perspective, right? Of connecting with things that are bigger than me. So leaning into faith, leaning into spirituality, leaning into nature, right? Just different aspects of life to help gain perspective, right? In terms of the journey, kind of looking in hindsight, there was a very clear path each time that I went through a round of burnout and the divorce and the chronic pain, right? Each time with all of those transitions, there was a clear path that I was only able to identify in hindsight. And that path was this vehicle that I took. I love how you use that word vehicle, because it really was this vehicle, right? And what I mean by that is I've actually coined the term CAR, right? A CAR method. So that was a perfect segue into my CAR method. So to get anywhere from where you are, right, in the middle of that crisis, in the middle of that life transition, where everything can feel like chaos. It can feel like, often in many of those situations, like your whole world just got turned upside down, right? So taking an example of my career, as you mentioned, right? This is a career that I, spent 25 years in school, right? Studying for, that I took out student loans, like all of this stuff, such an investment to then be faced with feeling burnout for doing something that I enjoy, doing something that is very meaningful to me, yet still feeling this burnout, right? It can feel like, wait, what just happened? How did this happen? Right? And so when you're in a situation, whatever situation that is, it can just feel like your world just got flipped upside down, right? And so the first part of this CAR method, right, which to get from point A to point B, I suggest that you do take a vehicle, and that vehicle be a CAR, where C stands for clarity. First, it's just clearing through some of that chaos, right? Finding some clarity. And, a big part of it for everyone who's listening right now, to offer just kind of one sort of little nugget that you can take to identify, if you are going through a challenging situation right now, to identify that clarity, I would start with just naming it, naming what you're going through. Because so often it can just, the entire situation, the entire experience can get so jumbled up in your mind, and we can get so lost in our thoughts up there. And there's actually great power to just naming it. Yeah. I'm going through a divorce. This is really hard. I'm experiencing burnout. I never thought I'd experience it. This is really hard, but I have a name for it now, right? Yeah. What that does, one thing that does is it helps create space between you and the situation. It helps create space between you and the crisis, right? So you are not the burnout. You are not the divorce. You are not the chronic pain. You are not the health diagnosis. it is something you are experiencing. It is something that you're going through. And when you name it, you start to create some of that space, right? So the first step is clarity, right? Then the next step, and I actually guide people through a much more detailed process through that when I'm working with clients. But this is just a great place for anyone listening to start. I really want to make sure that you're getting those nuggets, right? Yep. And so the next step is acceptance, right? So once we have some clarity, once we've like cleared through some of that chaos, it's really about making sense of the now. So now what do we do, right? You can only create change or transformation from where you are, right? So this is where often I work with clients in cultivating that mind-body connection, working with things like movement, mindful eating, that sort of thing, because our body is always sending us signals. And it's up to us to pay attention and to listen to those signals, right? And so really cultivating that mind-body connection as a way to help ground yourself into the present moment, ground yourself into your current reality, because it's only from that place that transformation can begin to occur, right? And then the R in the CAR, so we have C for clarity, A for acceptance, the R is rebuilding. This is where we actually take all of that information and then begin to look at our external environment and see what our plan of action is going to be. What sort of intentional changes with this newfound awareness and clarity and acceptance, what sort of intentional changes can we make from here? So that you're no longer reacting to the situation. You're no longer reacting to the crisis, but you are responding to it with intention, awareness, and alignment.
Let me tell you who I see when I look at you, okay? I see someone who is very self-assured. I see someone who's very energetic. I see someone who's very positive, right? You got a smile on your face. You're very, very positive when you talk about these different strategies and things. So I'm guessing this wasn't you before you began to share your story and go through this self-transformation. Am I correct in that?
Oh, absolutely. I would not have been here if I hadn't done this work.
How fast was that transformation from the moment that you visited this doctor? He gave you these different tools. You began to feel comfortable sharing your story. How long did it take from then to get to this energetic state? Not necessarily where you are now, because you've continued to grow and develop, but how quickly was this transformation for you, would you say?
Well, let me just say what I started to do. So I started to use EFT every day. So I started to notice when I was becoming emotional during the day. And that's the first step for everyone. Unless we can stand back and say, okay, look at me, I'm starting to get frustrated or angry or sad or whatever it is. Once we can do that, then we can work on it. But if we're still caught up in that emotion, if we're being frustrated and taking it out on someone, we can't do anything about it. So I would start noticing during the day when I was feeling something, and then I would tap about it. And as the weeks went by, I noticed that I started to become more calm during the day. I was just a calmer person, but I wanted to go faster. I could see things changing and I was determined to make it go faster. So what I did is I wrote down every emotional memory I could think of from my childhood. So all the big traumas, all the little traumas, all the beliefs, all the embarrassments, all the humiliations, all the teasing, all those things from childhood. And I tapped through one each night for about an hour to an hour and a half each night. And over that period of months, and I don't have an exact time frame for you, but it was definitely multiple months.
Yep.
I started to become peaceful. My mind, which had been very negative and very judgmental and very critical, became quiet. And I had never experienced that before. I didn't know that was peace. But I couldn't tell until I got to that place where my mind was peaceful. I couldn't tell that those phrases, that criticism, that those judgments, they were phrases that my dad had used that had been programmed into me, and I would use them over and over again. I couldn't see that until I'd let them go and could look back on it and see that that was the case.
Wow. And throughout this process, this is you going on your journey through those 3 steps that we're going to talk about. Is that correct?
This
With
is just
tapping
the
is a
first
big
step.
piece of it.
Tapping was the first step.
Okay. So I'd like to skip to the end here real quick. And I know that, so we're going to the last page of the book. I'm just curious to understand, why is it that now you have your book? Why is it that now you share your story? Like what are you out there to accomplish in the world by sharing your story?
Because we are so incredibly powerful. I had no idea that what I can do now was a thing, was that something we could do. I'd never heard of it before. So I wanted to tell people that we can do this and show them how to do it. Because I mean, it still blows my mind every day when I'm doing this work that I can hear and feel adhesions in my connective tissue, in my bones. I can feel it release. So if we could all do this, I think we can change the world.
That's amazing. So if you went back to Anne at 19, 20 years old, how would this have changed your life / her life? If we dissociate here, how would this have changed her life? When you're looking back, what would have been different in your life had you known these things 20 years earlier?
Life would be more fun. I mean, there is so much depth to life that I'm aware of now that I didn't know existed back then. So if I'd have done this work back then, life would be totally different. Yes, it would have been fun.
Do you believe at the same time that the hardships that you went through and that 2 decades of stress and fear, as you mentioned earlier, do you believe that that set you up to understand the flip side of what you experience now at the same time? So I guess the question is it necessary and even important to feel the pain and feel those emotions in order to understand what beauty or the other side even looks like? The reason I ask that is because you went through 2 decades of turmoil in a way to now be sharing your story to help all these people, to have your book. Like, you wouldn't be doing that if that event didn't happen at 19, if you didn't go on that 20-year journey. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I believe that those of us who have a lot of trauma in childhood, we're the ones who seek out the journey to release that, right? So we're the ones who are likely to go deeper, maybe into spirituality or something like that, because we've had that experience in childhood. So one of the biggest takeaways for me that I realize is that those emotions, those memories, are just energy that is stuck in the body. So we don't have to attach to them. We need to work through it, but it's just energy and we can release it. So that's a huge part of the understanding that can allow anyone to release it. And I think it helps with when you've got children as well. And you start to realize that, okay, they're on this journey of their own. And really, it doesn't matter how much trauma they have, because those that are going to have the most trauma are going to be the ones that are going to search out the most healing. So in some ways, it can make it easier to let your children be as they are, not be, helicopter parents. Just allow them to have their experiences and know that the trauma they're getting in their life, it's just energy that's stuck in the body, and it can be released when they're ready. Of course, they're not always ready when we want them to be ready.
Have these teachings helped you when it comes to parenting your 2 boys? Because when you started this journey of self-transformation, how old were your 2 boys, roughly?
They were roughly 6 and 10, something like that.
Oh, so they were still very young. Okay. And how did these transformations for yourself, how did it affect them, if it did at all?
Well, it did in a couple of ways. I could use the technique on them. So if they were having some kind of nightmare or something, I would tap on them to release it. But mostly it was working on me. And one of the other traumas I had was when I was 9 to 11, I was sent to my brother's boarding school, which is a boys' boarding school. Wow. So the first year I was the only girl boarder. So there were some day girls that would go home at the end of the day, but then I was left with all the boys, and I was teased mercilessly. So I did not like boys in the age range of 9 to 13. So I had to get over that before my boys got to that age.
Wow.
Because I was afraid of boys at that age. So I knew I had to do that. So I did all that work. I did, the EFT on those experiences at that school and released that trauma, that energy, so that I was more peaceful on the inside. I didn't mind boys that age. So changing myself brought me more to peace, and then my family was a reflection of that. So yes, the household became more peaceful.
Very fascinating. Okay, so let's talk about these 3 steps that you've taken to release these traumas. So we're on step 1 right now that we're talking about, okay? And this has to do with, this incorporates the tapping and releasing the emotions. So how do you define what step 1 is, and how does one begin that phase?
Well, step 1 was what we talk about. It's using EFT and going through traumas. If you want to go fast, you would go through your traumas from your childhood, or you could just use it on a day-to-day basis. Whenever you were reacting to something, you could release that energy and come back to peace, and then carry on with your day. But what I realized EFT is doing is it's opening up the subconscious mind. So for example, like with my mother's death, the first time I tapped on it, it was just releasing the surface layer emotions, the surface story. And as I did more and more tapping, more details of the story would come to mind that had been hidden underneath those emotions. So that's what happens. It's opening up of the subconscious mind. Along with that, at the same time, it's kind of one and the same thing. Our awareness deepens, our self-awareness deepens. We become more aware of ourselves. So I became more aware of my emotions that I hadn't been aware of before. So I could name my emotions. Like a lot of us, when someone asks us how we're doing, we'll just say, we're okay, we're fine, because we don't want to really look inside and notice how we're feeling. So over time, I became aware of those emotions. Now, there's another layer underneath that, which are the physical sensations underneath the emotions. So when we say we're feeling frustrated, what we're really doing is describing the tension that we're holding our body. We're holding it in a particular posture, and we give that the name frustration. But we can become aware of it. So for me, frustration is tension across my solar plexus. So when I became aware of that level of self-awareness, I didn't need to tap anymore, didn't need to use EFT. I could just focus on the sensations themselves. Wow. Now I could have tapped about this frustration I can feel in my solar plexus, or I could just focus on that tension in my solar plexus.
Yeah.
So that's what I started doing. That's what I call step 2. I call it feeling your feelings, which is kind of an obvious name, but it's not as easily done as it is said.
Feeling your feelings, feeling them and how they manifest in your body, and being aware of that. So you mentioned that not everyone can participate in step 2. Do you believe that is because, why do you believe that is, that not everyone can participate in feeling their feelings?
Well, I couldn't. When I started, I was not aware of my feelings. So you have to, or I had to at least release enough tension, enough of those traumas, so I could notice my emotions and then notice the physical sensations. Because it was stuck in my subconscious mind. It was there all along. I had just had all these emotions that were holding that awareness away from me.
So now that you're aware of how this emotion is manifesting itself physically, you mentioned your solar plexus, and you've got that tension there. Is your goal to immediately eliminate that tension? Like, what is your goal once you now recognize, okay, my body, I'm holding myself this way and I'm feeling this way physically? What do you do next?
Okay, so that is what I call this feeling your feelings. And it's not just mental. There's a physical aspect to it as well, because it's just energy that is stuck in the body. It's energy that we've suppressed. We've never allowed it to be felt. So the first time I did this, I was standing at the kitchen sink doing the dishes, and I noticed a thought that had some emotion around it. So it could be something as simple as, I'm afraid of making this phone call. And I would notice where that fear was inside of me. So it would be fear also for me is more in my stomach area. So I would notice where that fear was, and I would stop. I would hold myself like a statue, because I realized if I took a deep breath, or if I moved even, I would lose my focus on that tension. Now, when I say focus, I'm not talking about thinking about it. I'm talking about feeling it. So if I tell you right now, how does your right knee feel? You put your focus on your right knee.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing by feeling the fear in my stomach. I would hold myself like a statue, and I would talk to it. I would say things like, okay, I can feel you, fear, sitting right there in my solar plexus. I just want to feel you. I want to allow you to be felt. Just focus on that feeling. And at some point, obviously, I'd have to take a deep breath. And then I would think the thought again, I'm afraid of making this phone call. I would notice that the fear had diminished slightly.
Wow.
So then I would do it again. Same thought, same fear, slightly less fear. I would talk to it, hold myself like a statue. And at some point, have to take a deep breath, and it would have diminished again. And I would keep doing that over and over again until the fear had disappeared.
Let's say you were speaking to a 12-year-old, 12 to 15-year-old who was in a very similar situation to you. And they say, John, just what do I do? I've got all these fears. I have all these thoughts. What would you say to that person who was in that similar home environment?
Sure. First off, I would say it's okay. It's okay. You need to be as kind to yourself as you would be to other people. And we can work through this. You're not the first person to have these thoughts. You're not the first person to feel this way, and you're not going to be the last person. But with love, with understanding, with patience, we can work through all of this. So tell me a little bit more about your situation, and I'm sure together we can help this. And if we need more help, we'll go and seek that. But I want you to feel safe about what you're saying. I want you to know it's all right. And I want you to know that you can tell me anything, and I'm not going to judge you harshly. I'm not going to judge you negatively because I love you. That's what
beautiful.
I would say. Thank you, man.
Damn, brother. That's amazing. It almost sounds like you said those same things to your two boys.
You know, I don't think I've necessarily said that, but I think that I'd probably go so much in that area now because it wasn't something that was in mind. So maybe I even do it too much. My kids are probably like, they're probably like, yeah, Dad, we know you love us.
Yep.
But for me, at 20 years old, when I ended up leaving upstate New York because I had to, at 20, almost going on 21, I had a couple $100 in my pocket, and I had that death threat happen to me. And I made a phone call to a pivotal person in my life. And I said, he was in California, my friend Daryl Hagan. And I said, listen, my brother, I need to leave, or I'm going to end up in jail, or I'm going to end up dead. And he said, I don't have any room for you in the house, but if you want to sleep on the floor, you could sleep on the floor. And it was the best opportunity I ever had. And my parents drove me to the airport, Brandon. This is back in the day before TSA. And they drove me to the airport, and they were able to walk me to the plane.
Wow.
And at 21 years old, that was the first time I'd ever heard my father say, I love you. And he called me son. And he said, son, I love you. And it hit me to my core. And I make sure that, man, life is short. Anybody that is in my life that I love, I want them to always know that I love them. And so, you know, I got on a plane at 20 years old, and I felt like the weight of the world was coming off my shoulders. And little did I know that my whole future would be there. I would find what my passion was. I would find what my vocation is. I would start transcending being selfish in thinking about, why is this happening to me? Woe is me, and start focusing on helping other people. And I went to California to be a trainer. And really, in reality, my man, I thought I was going there and my profession would be helping people, but I found out that as I helped them on their journey and they invited me into their life, into the intimate areas of their life, they were healing my soul. As I thought I was helping them, they were really paying me back tenfold, and just being part of crafting their future and being part of their wellness and their health.
Yeah. Well, that's the most intimate place you can be, is helping people with what is most important, which is your health. If you have health, if you don't have health, you have nothing, right? So it in itself is such an intimate place to be. So when you're in California now, you go there with the intention, it sounds like, to be a trainer for people, right? Those people weren't necessarily in your intentions. Some of the people that everyone in the world knows, these A-list individuals, right? So how did that happen? So you're sleeping on the floor. You're like, what do I do now that I'm here with $500 in my account or whatever it was? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's crazy. So here I am. I come from this small farm town, 2,000 people. I have this dream. It turns over to be a trainer. I go out there first, forget being a trainer. I was working landscaping. I was working loss prevention, catching shoplifter. I was working as a bouncer while I studied to be a trainer. I did everything and anything I could to put a few dollars in my pocket and eat another can of tuna fish while I was sleeping on the floor, right? But those times I look back are the best times because they made me literally and figuratively hungry. I was hungry because I had no money for food. I was hungry because I wanted something better out of my life. So I started studying to be a trainer. And in 1993, somewhere around there, way back, way before most of your listeners were ever alive, there was one test that I knew of for training. It was from the American Council on Exercise, and I studied to go and take that in person at San Diego State University. I saved up the money to take the test, and I went and took it. And it was probably the first test I passed in the last 20 years. And I passed that test, and I just started in this small town called Temecula, California. It's near San Diego. And I literally had a couple $100 to my name, and I put together flyers, and I paid some kids to pass out flyers. And my phone started ringing instantly. And I didn't have the answers to the questions that people were asking, like, how much do you charge? Do you have a gym? I didn't have any of these answers. So if people think you have to have it all figured out, it's not the case. And in fact, I was so young that I felt embarrassed that adults were calling me, that I would disguise my voice and make it deeper because I thought I'd sound more important when they called me on the phone.
Wow.
And when I would prepare, like I'd be rehearsing in the mirror ahead of time, because back in the day we had a thing called the answering machine. And so 3 people would call and inquire about training, and I would call them back. And here I am in this deeper voice going, yes, I'd like to speak, returning your phone call about training. And so it started from there. And I was blessed in the sense that I ended up getting one client, and it was $12 an hour. And it was the best $12 I'd ever made in my life. And I just started rolling, and I got another client, and I got another client. And before you know it, within 6 months, I was working 40 hours a week and just loving what I was doing. Now I'm immersed in helping people. Now I'm immersed in changing people's life for a positive thing. And I started losing the identity of having to be a tough guy, losing the identity of being connected with anger and violence and fear. And I started living in what my passion is, and life started changing. Was it in a minute? No. Was it in a week? No. But was it over time? Yes. And so I go from this small town. I worked there probably 5 or 6 years, just training people. And then I made the move from that Southern California area to the Los Angeles, Hollywood area. And I moved there.
Why did you move there?
So a little insight is I also had a dream of getting into TV. I had a dream of getting into movies, to being an actor, but I was always too embarrassed to ever tell anybody. I was too embarrassed about what they would think. I wanted to get into fitness magazines, but I never told anybody. And so I kept this dream inside, and I moved to that area to be geographically close to that. And a little known thing is I was able to move to Hollywood, and then I got into training people that were pretty known. And then I also got fulfilling my dream of getting on TV. I was on every soap opera as an actor. I did. It was crazy, man.
What soap opera were you on?
Every one of them. I was on Days of Our Lives, Young and the Restless, General Hospital. It's where I met one of my most famous clients right now. He was an extra on the show, and I had a few speaking lines, and we met on that show as a comedian named Sebastian Maniscalco. I met him, Jesus, man, maybe 30 years ago now, over 20 years ago. So I was on all these shows, and then I found out also that wasn't my vocation. That wasn't my passion, because although it was fun and I had success in it, here I am acting on a show with Pam Anderson, or I'm in this movie. I did not get the satisfaction I did from helping people. You know, it was a dream I had, and I went and investigated it, and I found out it wasn't the road for me, because I describe it as the Easter bunny in my book. It's all shiny and chocolatey on the outside, but for me, it was hollow on the inside. I didn't get the pleasure when I came home or I was done with a day of work. And, you know, I feel like God, whatever you believe in, whether it's the universe, God, for me, it's God, kind of gives you signals. The universe gives you signals out there. I had been grinding away, doing this acting thing, going on auditions, scratching away to get a couple lines here, this role there, and everything. And I had good success. And then I made the decision when I went to an audition that I wanted to only focus on training. It gave me the best pleasure in my life to see people change, to get involved with them. And so I called my wife and I said, you know what? Today's my last audition. I feel like it's time for me to retire this. And I called my agents and I said, thank you so much for all you've done. I want to send lunch over to the office, but I'm not getting pleasure out of this. And I thanked them and I moved on. And within 24 hours, I got a call from my agent and said, look, we know that you called and are done with acting, but you have an offer you don't have to audition for. There's a mini series, a director that you've worked with twice in the past is directing, and he wants you for the role. And it's a couple weeks worth of work, which is a good chunk of change. And you'll be on this mini series. And the mini series was about Jesus's life, which is crazy. And I said, you know what? If you had called me yesterday, I would have said, thank you. Let's do this. It's amazing. But I've made a decision that I'm happy with, and I'm going to have to pass. And it was the only time in my life that I was given an offer of a part that I didn't even have to audition for. And from that moment, my training went to the next level. My understanding of how to help people went to the next level. My understanding on how to get information and discern it for myself and then deliver it to other people went to the next level. And I've only focused on training. And so your original question through that long-winded answer was, how did you get involved with people that are well-known or you see on TV? I honestly think it's about just doing my job well by really making it important to me. It's important to me, and being in a geographic area where, look, if you're in upstate New York and you want blacktop done, I have 20 Italian friends that'll do your blacktop in 10 minutes, right? Because they're there. But if you're in Hollywood or you're in LA and you happen to do training well, people will hear about that. And eventually got to all the different people, whether that was Ziggy Marley, who's won 7 or 8 Grammys, or Shakira, or whoever, people I've worked with, they hear about you. And then someone's making a phone call and they're asking you for your services. So Brandon, I don't know if I necessarily did anything special than otherwise prioritize what I was trying to do, which was help other people. And then through prioritizing other people and who was sitting across the table from me, really just got the word out and got me, all the exposure I ever needed.